like trying to mime carrying a coffin. I was so focused on what I was doing that I was trying to put it into my body, and Matt Wally kind of looks at me, he's like, you know, no one can see you now. You don't have to pretend yet. So, hi, I'm Aaron Shand, and I'm a member of the Rogues Resident Acting Ensemble.
Did you grow up in Tucson?
I did. I was born and raised out here. I grew up, my parents live just a couple miles south of the Pima County Fairgrounds, and so that's where I grew up. A little place called Corona de Tucson.
Did you want to be an actor when you were a little kid?
No. I had wanted to be, well, first I wanted to be a baseball player.
This is everyone's answer.
I don't know. Probably sports. You know, you at the playground you're introduced to sports, and that's sort of the first thing that you fall in love with. But then I wanted to be an astronaut. I was sort of undecided as to whether I wanted to be just sort of an aeronautical engineer and be a scientist, or what I was leaning towards was going to like the Air Force Academy, and I wanted to fly the space shuttle. So I had wanted to be an astronaut pretty much all the way up until my junior year of high school. I had to fulfill my fine arts credit for the state, and my mom had been pushing me to try drama. And so I took a beginning drama class. I didn't have to audition for it. It was just the standard course for my fine arts credit. And just being on stage and being in front of an audience, it just sort of, I felt alive in a way that I had never felt before. And it sort of coincided with, I had to take physics that year for the eventual, aeronautical engineering, and I just was so bad at it. I was so bad at it. Then the following year, I auditioned to be in the upper level drama classes, and I got into the intermediate drama course, and then eventually I auditioned for the acting program at the U of A, and that was that. I loved the Shakespeare training. They have such a good classical program there in terms of the Shakespeare classes, and that coupled with stage combat was sort of that was sort of my bread and butter. That was what I really loved, and what I still kind of carry with me now. I ended up doing an internship in Milwaukee with the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, and that lasted a year. And then after that, I moved to LA. I had always wanted to do film. I mean, I spent probably 6 or 7 years, 8 years out there in California. You know, I was in a few commercials, and I did a couple independent films, and but it wasn't quite as satisfying, and it just wasn't quite the experience that I was hoping it to be. And that, coupled with, you know, the birth of my first child at the time, I just sort of kind of lost track of working in California, and that's eventually what brought me back here. I ended up at the Rogue, like many people, with my connection to Matt Bowdren. If I was coming back, I thought the Rogue would be kind of a great opportunity to sort of kind of get back into acting, because I'd sort of taken a break from it for a while, but and so Matt sort of kind of extended the hand and sort of invited me back in, and I ended up auditioning, and I got to do a couple shows that first year, and then it was shortly thereafter that I became a part of the ensemble. So
and your first Rogue show was Grapes of Wrath, is that right?
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was. That was a really wonderful experience. I had sort of been on hiatus from acting for a couple years. I really had no expectations when I walked in. I had met Joe and Cindy in passing, and I just remember showing up to rehearsal on the first day, and the read through, I was just sort of blown away by the talent in the room. The Rogue has sort of created this wonderful existence where they're sort of like a regional theater sort of hiding in plain sight. Yeah, so that first read, I was just blown away by the talent in the room, and crap, this isn't going to be easy. I'm going to have to step up my game. My wheelhouse is sort of like modern American theater from like the 1950s on. So like, when there's a full set, full props. I feel like that's sort of my wheelhouse, and I feel like The Rogue really forces me as an actor to really use my imagination. There's so many times that we're doing scenes that, I just feel it challenges me to use my imagination, and to sort of use my body in a way that I'm probably not comfortable normally doing.
You got to give me an example of that.
Well, now, okay. I've got to be on stage and be a door.
Right.
There's just so many instances of, and like The Awakening, having to physicalize stepping into the ocean and swimming, and I remember every time I'd watch Bryn do her swimming, and it was like, God, she makes it look so beautiful, and here I am just like, what am I doing? I hope this looks passable.
So as someone who plays both leading men and character roles, do you have a preference?
Or
is one easier than the other, or?
I actually like going back and forth. I think probably the biggest difference is the character roles you get to, there's a little bit more that I get, there's a little bit more room for playing. And a little bit more that I get to bring to the table that's unique to me. Whereas, with the leading man roles, you do sort of have, there's so much fleshed out in the script that you do sort of have this kind of this defined box that the character lives in, and then you get to play around in that box. But I think with the character roles, you get to bring so much, you get to develop so much of your own on it because there's just less of that character fleshed out in the script.
What's the most challenging role you've played for The Rogue, or a character you really struggled with?
I'd say one of the most physically challenging roles was probably Moby Dick. Just because there were so many lines and there was so much physicality in that show, and I would just sit backstage and try to, hold in as much energy as I could. But I remember thinking every night before going on stage for Moby Dick, just like, how am I going to get through another one? And then going out and doing it. So I think in terms of a challenge, Moby Dick was probably the most challenging for me.
Is there a part you've played before that you'd like to again with more experience behind you?
I think a lot of the roles that I wish I could do are the ones that I haven't gotten to do yet. I don't know.
What are the roles you haven't done?
I've always wanted to play Romeo, but I think that ship has mostly sailed. I'm still pushing for Henry IV. I've always wanted to play Hal.
Do you have any kind of pre-show rituals or superstitions or anything when you're working?
No, I do try to warm up. We studied Linkletter to death at the Ove, and I didn't retain a ton of it, but there are a few exercises. The only thing I can think of is something I learned from it's actually a commercial acting teacher in LA. I always get super nervous before the show. Super nervous to even after all these years, I get really nervous, especially on kind of the first three shows. Like that first weekend, I always, my nerves are sort of, and I'm shaking backstage. And so as I stand backstage, sort of ready to go on for the first time, I sort of acknowledge the nervousness and the adrenaline, and I tell myself, I say to myself, thanks for getting me prepared. What that is that's adrenaline, and it's your body getting it ready to be its most active self. So just say, thanks for that. Thanks for helping. And every time I sort of do like, okay, I'm nervous, my adrenaline's rushing. Good. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm in the moment. Perfect.
Who or what would you say you've learned the most from over the years as an actor?
Probably the two most influential things I think on me as an actor in particular are, one, stage combat. I remember one day in class, my partner and I were fighting, and the teacher came up and said, "You guys are technically perfect. I mean, you're the best in the class. You're technically there. No notes I can give you. Now do it again and just try to kill each other." And I think that in itself was sort of a wonderful acting lesson in terms of focus on committing to each moment 100%. Really do what you're pretending you're doing. Don't just pretend to do it. Do it to a certain extent,
right,
within reason, and that'll sort of kind of bring and breathe life into the performance. The other thing that comes to mind is I read a book when I was in Milwaukee. I read a book called How to Stop Acting by Harold Guskin, and that book was just sort of all about kind of learning to just trust your instincts and try it. And if it doesn't work, someone will tell you, or you'll walk away going, "Oh, that was terrible. I can't do that again." So those are probably the two most influential things in terms of kind of my actor training.
If the Rogue were to close tomorrow, what would you miss the most about working here?
The people. The community of the theater is, I think, what I love more than anything, more than the performance, the storytelling, it's the community. When I started doing theater in high school, I really felt, I think for the first time, I really felt like I belonged. You come into rehearsal, and for those 3 hours, everybody that's in the room is sort of your family, chosen family, which is which is a big distinction. That's been my greatest memory at the Rogue, and the thing I would miss the most is coming into work and seeing, you all, especially during COVID. I think it became apparent how important that was to me. Just that camaraderie and that being together and that feeling that that you're creating something together, and when it's over, you're the only people on the planet that are going to remember it, and you get to carry that with you. So just the ensemble, I just feel such a connection with everyone. Even if I don't express it, I just feel connected to everyone, and I would miss that the most. I mean, if you told me I could never act again, I would be disappointed. But I think telling me that I'd lost that community, that would be what was truly devastating for me.